Yes.
First off, I want to say thank you to San Carlos for hosting, doing a wonderful job, and the San Carlos staff doing a wonderful job at lunch, getting us some food, and the presentations at lunch, they were very good. And I know we don't have a lot of southeastern components here, so I just want to get an icebreaker and say, good afternoon, y'all. Okay, and for y'all that don't understand, y'all is a gender neutral, age neutral word. So that means everybody. Good afternoon, y'all. It's a little better, yeah. And there's another southern word you need to know. It's you gonna. And that is not a country across the ocean. It is, you gonna get on the swamp buggy or you're gonna walk. Very important words to know in our neck of the woods. But today, I'm going to talk about restoration, recovery, and resiliency on the landscape, especially how it applies to South Florida. On the left side of the screen, you'll see the blue marble. And we've heard talks today about the water and the cycle of water and how it impacts the land. What we also need to focus on is the hand that fire plays and how it's applied to the land. Whoop. I'm missing a slide there. Okay, I'm missing 3 slides. So anyway, so restoration of South Florida, it's kind of a noble idea. Everybody uses restoration. Everglades restoration is a big buzzword. It gets a lot of money from Congress. But what we don't define is how we're going to restore the area. The land and the animals that live upon that land rely on water in all forms to sustain life. Water in our area comes from multiple sources. One, the air, the moisture in the air, whether it be rainfall, whether it be the nightly dews that coat our vehicles, 100% recovery humidity, or whether it be the daily relative humidity and how that plays into how a fire burns. We also have groundwater. It can be standing water in the seasonal marshes, the depression marshes, the cypress domes. It can be the water that's bound up in the duff and litter decomposition. And to give you an idea of South Florida and how groundwater affects, if you stand up where you're at, your feet would be feet wet. If you stood on your chair, you would be in the nosebleed area, the high area of the reservation, and that would be feet dry. And then we have subsurface water, which will be our regional aquifers. That supplies our artesian wells, our springs, our seeps, and it also helps keep the coastal salinity out of the freshwater systems. This helps your marshes, your oyster beds, and your saltwater fisheries. All these forces together merge together as the life of the land. Recovery can be the rehydration of localized areas. Regional water storage projects, that's what they're called in South Florida, but what they do is supply drinking water to the towns. We have enough freshwater resources to supply 4 million people annually. There are 22 million people in Florida. We don't have the freshwater supply to supply everybody, so they do these restoration projects and they tend to go to the drinking waters. But what it does, it is allowed to percolate down and recharge some of the aquifers. There's also redirection of the traditional flows back to some surface version of a sheet flow pattern across the landscape. We also have recovery by fire. In the last 80 years, it has been by using dormant season fires, which are very predictable weather patterns. You know the moisture content, you know the weather pattern, whether it be a low coming through or a high pressure sitting on top of you and what the fire is going to burn. Well, these have promoted shade tolerant species that have turned into shaded fuel breaks across the landscape. impacting the spread of fire through large areas. So recovery can be using more of an ecological burn season, which is the dry season. It promotes the seed catch and seed germination rates. It removes competition, but it requires burning on today's marginal conditions, which were yesterday's optimal conditions. And then resiliency on the landscape is in the Creator's hands. The plants and animals on this land today can thrive if developers, project managers, land managers, fire managers allow fire to do what it can, allow water projects to rehab, allow the areas to recover, and most importantly, resiliency on the landscape takes time. Now, Florida's vegetation is determined by the depth of water table and fire return intervals. Much of South Florida is inundated for weeks to months throughout the year, followed by months of drying and then weeks to months of drought. The last 2 years have been very significant droughts, and we've seen quite a bit of fire. Water traditionally has been used for travel, trade, hunting, and methods of escape from pursuers. Fire has been used to promote regrowth of medicinal plants as camp moves from spot to spot, promote sunlight to the soil to allow seed germination, and to maintain travel paths and improve hunting. The winners of 1973, 1998, and this year, 2016, were the 3 strongest El Nino events South Florida has seen. 1971, 73, and 74, South Florida burnt coast to coast. This is a picture of where the Seminole reservations exist in Florida. During that 71, 73, and 74 time period, Brighton, Immokalee, Big Cypress burned. All the way to Hollywood, it burned coast to coast. This led to the 1974 report, and it was an interagency report talking about partnerships coming together. This is back in '74. It was Wildland Fire Management in South Florida. They looked back at the records and determined that neither the Calusas nor the Tequestas, which were there thousands of years before the Seminoles came to Florida, are believed to have used fire extensively, but they may have burned off the marshes to ease travel. When the Seminoles moved into Florida, they started living on the higher ground, and they started using fire to ease travel, to clear land, drive game, improve game habitat, and control insects. They also burned the pinelands to promote the growth of kunti, which is one of the native foods. And the mention about El Nino is, this is 2016, the strongest El Nino we have on record. In January, when I normally burn, I was going through knee-deep water to mid-ankle and sometimes a little deeper than that. Places I couldn't even take my four-wheel drive trucks out into. What's going to happen this year with El Nino? We'll know next year's report. Peninsula Florida is geologically young. Everglades emerged from the sea about 10,000 years ago. Supposedly about 20,000 years ago, Florida was twice its size, and Florida was connected to Cuba and the Bahamas. So we've had drastic water changes over time. Vern mentioned about being surrounded on 3 sides by water. We got water on 3 sides: the Gulf, the Atlantic, and the Caribbean. During much of the year, water inundates much of Florida. And what's unique about our area, because of the way we are jut out into the water, is we get sea breezes from both sides. As the land heats up during the day, and this can be any month of the year, we saw it in January this year. As the land heats up, the hot air rises. It pulls moisture air in from the coast, inland. when that moist air heats up, forms thunderclouds. And you'll get these precipitation called sea breeze storms. In April, you start getting a lot of lightning out of it. And we'll get 300 to 3,000 lightning strikes in one storm as it moves through. They continue on through September, and we get less and less lightning strikes, but you'll still average over 300 lightning strikes per storm. These lightning strikes can be shown on this graph. This is average square mile lightning strikes in a year. So if you look at Tampa region, is in the purple, over 12 lightning strikes per square mile, average in a year. And we also call the I-4 corridor between Tampa and Daytona Beach. 1998, that area burned quite well. So well that we were driving dozer transports and Type 6 engines around the Daytona Speedway because they couldn't hold races there. The lower portions are the pinelands that affect us. And magically, I don't know if DOT and the Weather Service work together. I'm not sure if they can cooperate that way. But I-75 and I-95 are two major north-south corridors, are right along that lightning strike line. So the weatherman can just say, your storm's going to be east of I-75 today, or west of I-75 today. And I guess it makes it easy on the map. But what all these lightning strikes mean is a very short rotation fire return interval in vegetation and animals that are accustomed to this. This map depicts the 1856 survey of Florida. There are no canals. You see horse trails and driving lanes where they would ship cows to market. Changes began about 1880 in channelizing the rivers and developing it. And then in the 1928, they had a levee around Lake Okeechobee, the large water body, and they put towns on the south end of it. In 1928, hurricane came through, destroyed the levee, flooded the towns, and killed between 1,700 and 2,300 people. They don't know an actual estimate because there were people never documented that lived in the area and could not find any evidence of it. After the 1928 hurricane, they decided to do more damage and drain more of the land, leading to a network of over 4,000 government-maintained canals to drain the land. This has led to a loss of over 46% of our wetlands. The wetland mass of Florida used to comprise 56% of the total land mass in Florida, and now it's down to 31%. Modifications to the natural water levels, the patterns of water flow, unseasonal burning, uncontrolled dispersal of invasive, tenacious, exotic species, and reckless land clearing have left southern Florida without a truly natural ecosystem. So then they decided to go Everglades restoration. In trying to do this, they looked at the possible water flows based on some of the early topographic maps, and that's on the right-hand side of your screen. What they did not take into effect is an area of flow to the west of that. That's the central and eastern Everglades, but not the western Everglades. When they drain the current flow, they push a lot of water out the two rivers, Caloosahatchee and St. Lucie rivers. And then we have large protests and governor involved and a lot of issues because it is destroying the saltwater marine ecosystem around those two rivers. The effort is going to be try to push water south. And it's going to be impacted by roads and other structures, but they're trying to push water by lots of sugarcane land, rehydrate it, flood it to a 2 or 3 foot elevation of water, and have water sheet flow back to the south. Once again, this model does not depict the western Everglades, and that is a new partnership we're going into with Army Corps, Water Management District, National Park Service, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service where we're trying to bring water back. If we bring water back on our reservation, our 14,000 acres, we rehydrate over 300,000 acres downstream of us. And then we have restoration of fire. Florida's ecosystems evolved with fire, whether it be natural or man-made. When I teach our courses to agency-prescribed burners, we teach that frequency trumps seasonality. And part of the reason we say that is South Florida, everything grows. We get tomatoes and peppers right now, they're picking. Watermelons are getting ready to hit the market, so is cantaloupes, and it's a great time to be down there. I go to a farmer's market and pick up $20 worth of vegetables for a week. But the vegetation, palmetto, gallberry, cabbage palm, sawgrass, the blue stems, they all have seasonal cycles and mechanisms to help the spread of fire. This is a photo 4 days after a wildfire. The vegetation growth is between 3 and 6 inches. The palmettos have already grown over 3 inches. And this is 4 days after a drought wildfire ran through the area. And the time the area was burned, the guys there were talking about the humidity being so much that their hard hats were wet, their Nomex was wet, the fire was jumping and spreading on them, and trees were spontaneously combusting, and the pitch and the pines. So most wildlife species migrate to these areas. The plants regenerate so fast that we'll have wildlife on the burn with us. 2010, we had a black bear that kept going in and out of the fire with us. He would go in, he would bust up a log, eat termites and ants, and as we would come by, he would leave and come back in right behind us. 2008, I watched a group of 8 gobblers, male turkeys, run in front of the flames and eat insects, run behind the flames and eat burnt insects. And I'm just curious, was anybody here in the January 2013 BIA mentoring group? Nobody here? Okay, good. Because that mentoring group burned part of our native area. It's called Unit Calbone Island 4. What they didn't know is while they were lighting, we had a Florida panther walking the trail with them. Saw the tracks twice over their footprints. And he would just go and step off the trail as the crews would come by. I didn't tell him that day either. Vegetation responses within the first year show just how resilient the vegetation is. This picture is 6 months. This picture was taken in January of this year. The wildfire was in June of last year. At that point in time, the water table was 6 foot lower than I've ever seen it. I lost 60 acres of pine because they hit the cap rock and their tap roots couldn't get water. And we had a wind-driven wildfire. We let it burn. Talking about resource benefit fire. We let it burn until it got threatened where it was going to jump on the neighbor's private property. And we put a control line along the existing trails and we burned off of it. 6 months later, we have 20 species of plants in this one plot. That's resilient landscape. The other things we're doing is we're looking at recovery from past practices, and mainly canals and how they're changing the water structure. We focus on the resiliency of the plants and animals. We know if we can make minor changes in the hydraulic, the plants and animals are going to respond. These modifications can be very low-tech, and the engineers hate it when we talk low-tech. We mentioned just turning a culvert round. So it doesn't drain the land, it pushes water into the land. And they have a problem with this idea. They need something engineered and man-made, when all we got to really do is take out a culvert and let nature do the rest. and elevating these canals, so we're changing the water course so we get more water. You know, I mentioned the recovery of fire, and it's very important to mention the play that our partners put into this. I've heard talk about handshake agreements, partnerships, not written MOUs. We have a handshake agreement with the National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, State Division of Forestry, State Department of Environmental Protection, who owns the state parks, even the Fish and Wildlife Commission along the state. If we're planning to burn and we don't have resources, we pick up the phone. There's not a work order or anything associated with it. We need 2 people and 1 swamp buggy for a burn tomorrow. You got it. What time? They'll come over and burn with us. We'll go down and burn with them. What that helps is the fact when we have a wildfire, they're the first people we call. We're the first people they call. We go down there, we know how each other operates. And this year we were able to take part in a wildfire. We were first resources called in, mainly because we got a swamp buggy, and that's not normally available anywhere north of us. But the thing was, we started talking to the IC, and it was, this fire can be used for wildlife benefit instead of suppressing it. Of course, we had a minimal staff, and we had 13 lightning strike fires. So we let the fires run. 3 or 4 fires would combine and would run for some distance where they hit natural vegetation and went out, amazingly. You know, they went where a previous burn had been. It worked out beautiful. The only time we had issues was when it impacted I-75, and we were told we couldn't shut down I-75 because I think the interstate commerce is around $31 million a day that you shut it down. And you get a lot of calls from the governor then. But when we talk about resiliency, we look at water. Geologically young system like ours allows changes in a very short duration. 1 to 2 generations, you'll see changes on the landscape. Native vegetation is resilient once released from the stranglehold of invasives. Treated areas respond with new native growth that have been sitting in seed catch within 6 to 8 weeks. You know, the Seminole reservations are blessed with sunlight and year-round growing season, so it allows these native species to spring forth at any time of the year. And the changes that have happened the last 100 years, we realize are not going to take 10 years to fix. We may be looking at 200 years down the road before the system heals itself. But if we work with the hydrology, we work with the fire return intervals, we will impact this seed catch. We will help reduce the competition from invasives and promote the native plants and encourage the native wildlife. So I want to back up and also give you a timeline of Seminoles. You know, in 1513, Ponce de Leon discovered Florida. I think people already knew it existed down there. Call me strange, I don't know. 1636, you get hostilities growing because the people that are moving in are wanting to take land from the Native Americans. And finally, the people that are there are saying, we've had enough. 1685, you get the Spanish destroying major creek towns and pushing the creeks off of their ancestral lands. In 1730, we have the first record of Florida occupation by a creek. So that's not that long ago in geologic time, and especially compared to some western tribes. 1736, we get a proclamation effectively giving Florida to the Seminoles. That did not last very long. So what we look at is all these changes have been made. Water, sunlight, time, and fire alone cannot bring back the lost plants and animals. It does need help. Together with the Creator's wishes, we may improve the distribution and occurrence of plants that exist on the landscape now. And there are a lot of plants that are in dire need. And if we don't do something, we are going to lose those plants. The Seminoles were forced from their current location to their current location as they were pushed from their native lands in Georgia and South Carolina and Alabama. The U.S. Army unsuccessfully tried 3 times to forcibly remove them and to conquer them. Their motto is the unconquered. They never signed the treaty. In 1937, the tribe was given small patches of land, swampland, what couldn't be developed, what was thought worthless, and told to make a living. I think they were given like 300 head of cows, kind of the bone showing, disease-stricken, worst of the herd they could find. Today, the Seminole Tribe of Florida has one of the largest beef herds in North America, a thriving economic enterprise, and tribal member population growth. The Seminole lands exhibit the same traits as the Seminole Nation. We can restore the water and the fire to the land. The land can recover from the past practices, and the tribe is resilient and can overcome the obstacles in its way, same as the land can. Yep. Questions? Got time for questions?